The upcoming Snow White update is constantly in the news. That's good for Disney, right? I mean, you want your projects to get all the media attention possible. That's the dream. Well, in this case, not quite. Everyone's talking about the film, but it's about two different things. One is the star's complaint about the original story, that classic 1937 animated film, and also how Disney wiped the dwarfs clean out of the production for the wokest reasons possible. Now, the star is Rachel Zegler, who is a very deeply self-important actress, and she's been trashing the source material for some time now. It's old, it's antiquated, it needs to be improved, it's not feminist enough. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but only slightly. Here's what she's actually said about the movie.
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There is a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird. So we didn't do that this time. It's really...
Was I exaggerating? I don't think so. And then there's DwarfGate. Now, the original film was called, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Those dwarfs became part of pop culture history. Sneezy, Grumpy, Doc, you know these guys. Except the live-action Snow White would be dwarf-free. Why? Well, in part because little person actor Peter Dinklage said so. The Game of Thrones star gave an interview and he said that this new reboot is progressive, but it's not progressive enough if it's going to hire little people actors to play these iconic characters, the dwarfs. So Disney gave in. They shelved them, took them out. The Mouse House changed the dwarfs to magical creatures who helped Snow White along the way. We even saw a photograph from the set of the Snow White film. Here's Snow White surrounded by these new dwarfs, except they're all traditionally sized. Is that offensive? I hope so. I hope not. That's not what I'm trying for. Along the way, some little people actors said, hey, wait a minute, I don't agree with Peter Dinklage. We're going to lose work. These could be gigs for us. How many roles in Hollywood are tailor-made for little people? You see how complicated this gets? But here is the kicker. Disney just pushed Snow White from a 2024 release to 2025. And it shared its first official image from the film. The image I told you about, that was taken stealthily. It wasn't an official still from the movie. This is. And the picture has Rachel Zegler in the title role in the center of the image, surrounded by 7 CGI dwarfs. Clearly, Disney heard all the negative feedback about the dwarfless Snow White, and it's going to retool the film to bring them back, and it needs an extra year to make that all possible. Is there another explanation? I know some people say, well, the writer's strike and the actor's strike, they can't get the actors back on the set to film the production to get it all done, but from what I've read, the production was already shot. I think there was just a lot of post-production work that was left to be done. But, is there another explanation to why a year-long delay in this process? But tell that to the media. Multiple news outlets reported on the Snow White delay. It's what they do. It's what they should do. It is an important story. Disney's a big company. This is a major movie. And they never mentioned DwarfGate. Really? Seriously, they never mentioned it. Now listen, I get it. This isn't a hard news story. This isn't about Gaza. It doesn't involve your taxes or some sort of legislation that's going to impact healthcare. But it is fascinating to see how the press operates. Disney is left-leaning and it's very woke, and they hate Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. So Disney must be protected. We can't bring up any inconvenient narratives like DwarfGate. It doesn't exist. If we don't bring it up, maybe the audience doesn't realize it. And better yet, we can't let those trolls win. So we leave out a huge part of the story. Do you still trust the media? You have to do your homework these days. You have to look at different sources. You have to figure out who's lying to you, who's telling the truth. That goes for Hollywood news, and of course, bigger stories that impact us all. When it comes to the arts coverage, we're going to do our part right here on the Hollywood in Total podcast. And if we get something wrong, I want to hear about it. Do you ever dream about writing stories for a living, being an author, being a working author? No more 9 to 5, no more crazy, horrible bosses. Just you, a laptop, maybe a cup of coffee if that's your jam, and your imagination. What's exactly what Brian Niemeier has created for himself? Brian started writing novels about a decade or so ago. Now it's his full-time gig, and he couldn't be happier. Can you blame him? Even better, he has some lessons to share about how you too can follow his path to success. Now listen, it isn't easy. There's tons of hard work along the way, tons, but it is possible. The technology exists, the avenues to success exist. It isn't like it was 20 or 30 years ago. You can make this happen. And that's why I invited Brian on the show. I wanted to share his story and just maybe have him inspire a few of you out there to consider following in his footsteps. How great would that be? I mean, I hope it happens. I bet it might. But for now, I want to let Brian share his remarkable, inspiring story. Brian, thanks for joining the show. You and I were emailing back and forth before the mics turned on, but I want to focus on one thing right away. You said that you earn a living exclusively through your independent publishing. And first of all, congratulations. That's really impressive. It's just what everyone wants to do is to be creative and have a living based upon that. So that's great. But also, I'm sure there have been bumps along the way. There have been lessons you've learned. And I also want to, when I have these conversations, I want to share something that listeners can take away something from. So can you maybe put that in sort of the process here and say what you've learned along the way? And maybe there's a million lessons, but just a few that maybe are helpful and succinct that you can kind of pass along right now.
Definitely, Christian. And first, I wanted to say thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it. And I'm sure all of the indie creators out there who are working hard to make it work for themselves, like I did, appreciate you reaching out to independent conservative creators.
I love doing it. This is one of the reasons why I started the podcast. And honestly, that's what I am. I'm an independent creator. I basically quit a job a while back and try to figure out if I can make a living at this. And I've done it, and I'm incredibly grateful. But I love stories like yours where you're doing exactly the same thing, creating things on your terms. So, but go ahead, share some lessons you've learned along the way.
Yes. It's the story you hear about the 10-year overnight success, right? Everyone in the business is familiar with that. And my story differs from yours in that I did not quit a day job. I'm doing this largely because I was left with no choice, because there are some aspects of the situation I can't get into, and I don't want to burden your audience with it, but you could say that I was an early victim of a kind of a nascent form of cancel culture. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was working technically in IT for a local hospital system and was, by their independent metrics, doing a great job, but just got railroaded out by a kangaroo court formed by HR. And it was really my first real job out of college. So I'm just thinking, what am I going to do? Yeah, my career was just kind of strangled in the crib. And it was my mother, God bless her, who said, well, you've always loved to write. Why don't you try to get some of your stories published?
Mom knows best.
And amen. So that was around like 2011, 2012. So I thought, okay, I'm going to use this extra time and throw myself into it. So I started with the short stories that others have been advised to since time immemorial, just to make this short, did all the research I could, spent like years learning the business, read the entire blog of J.A. Conrath, who is a big early proponent and guru of independent publishing. And that's how I decided to stop trying to court the big New York publishers and go on my own.
Mhm.
So there's a whole other odyssey that split off from that fork of the road, but I wanted to pause and give you a chance to ask any follow-up questions about that.
I don't think so. One of the things that's great about our culture today, with all its flaws, is that you can go out and do the research. You don't have to go to college or, go back to college. There's so much information out there. And it's one of the things I've done as a blogger, as a podcaster, is I've just listened to a lot of podcasts and I've read a lot of websites and I've educated myself. And if there's an issue, you just go on YouTube and punch it in the search engine. Chances are there's going to be an answer to your question. So that is it's heartening to hear that. Were there moments along the way that were pivotal to you, either just something snapped into place where that, okay, I'm on the right path, or hey, now this is going to be something where I'm getting a living out of this?
Yes, two main events, both of which occurred within a few months of each other in 2016. So the first was when best-selling author with Baen Books, Larry Correia, with whom you may be familiar and your listeners are probably familiar, generously hosted what he calls a book bomb for my first novel, Ethereal. And with the book bomb, Larry just puts his massive social media and blog following at the disposal of one new promising author, and just tries to get it to rank as hard on Amazon as he can in one day.
I love that.
Oh, that makes two of us.
Yeah.
Because it ranked hard, and when I saw the royalty check just from that one event alone, that was the first time it dawned on me. I was like, wow, this is like more than I made in a month.
Oh gosh.
My last job. Yeah. So this is viable. That's what first told me that independent publishing could work to sustain a working author.
Before you go to the second one, I just want to mention, it's one of my biggest pet peeves about the conservative movement in general, is that there are a lot of big players out there, influencers, websites, platforms. I'm not going to name names. I don't want to go there, but they know who they are, who I wish they did more of that, because there are so many people like you who do have a strong voice, and all you need is that nudge. You just need that push, and these big players can give you that push. And thank you to Larry for doing just that. I actually want to have him on my podcast. I think I spoke to him a while back, but I want to chat again. So go ahead. What was the second point? Because that's a great story.
Yeah, we've had him on the Geek Gab podcast that I co-hosted, and he's a great guest. I highly recommend it. But to your question, so then by that point, I had put out my second novel, Soul Dancer. And at the time, there were a series of campaigns, like the Sad Puppies campaign started by Larry, the Rabid Puppies, the Happy Frogs. But all of them had the goal of uncovering the hypocrisy in the traditional publishing scene, which claimed specifically in the Hugo Awards that, it's merit-based. If you don't win an award, it's because you're not good enough, you're not a real writer. Mm. And these groups set out to prove that, no, it's really an incestuous log-rolling quid pro quo program where the token darlings of the moment are just signal boosted, and these people basically hand awards back and forth to each other. And they did that, and that intrigued me. So I got involved first, just sharing posts, getting involved, voting in the Hugos, and I ended up getting nominated for a John W. Campbell Award for Best New Author for an Ethereal. And that showed me that, hey, I do have a groundswell of support from readers. And then I just took that ball and ran with it. And with the help of multiple indie figures and my wonderful reader base, Soul Dancer won the first ever Dragon Award for Best Horror Novel.
So there you go. You're on your way. It took a while. It wasn't, you mentioned 2012 or so is when you started. These things don't happen overnight. They take an enormous amount of work. And, it is that persistence which I think marks the success stories. And I think that's the toughest thing to share. And it's the hardest lesson to learn because it ain't easy. And it's obviously the kind of thing that you don't want to hear. You want to hear those overnight sensations, but that does matter. Another thing you mentioned to me in our email conversations was the term neo-patronage. And I have a sense of it, but obviously this is your term or this is what you've been promoting. Share more about that and how that frees up artists like yourselves, to get away from the strings of modern publishing.
Yes. And you had mentioned potential bumps on the road challenges and setbacks. And not just me, but many authors are now experiencing one because I started researching and writing back at the dawn of the Kindle age, right? When we had this creative disruption, this disintermediation, as Conrath calls it, when for the first time, the big five New York publishers who had served as gatekeepers to the industry just found the walls thrown down around their gates. And to their credit, Amazon did do that. It allowed a whole new generation of authors who never had to submit a manuscript to an acquisitions editor, never had to query an agent to just reach readers directly. And folks like Amanda Hocking and Hugh Howey were making a living from it, and Joe. But since then, that paradigm itself has proved rather short-lived because ask any working author today, preferably in private, and they'll admit something's broken with Amazon now. You can type in the exact author, title, and genre of a book, and you won't get your search result on Amazon until like page 3.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and everything before that is just pay-to-play content. So discoverability has dropped to near zero, and it's starting to affect the big guys. Like even the Nick Holes and Jason Onspachs with their Galaxy's Edge, like their all of their pre-orders for their Sergeant Thor book got deleted. Amazon just claims they lost them. So they had to start from scratch with their launch. So whether it's woke interference or it's just broken algorithms they don't know how to fix, Amazon is diminishing in utility to sustain a writing career, which led me to go back to the drawing table and do more research. And that was how I've devised this prototypical neo-patronage model. And I can walk you and your listeners through that if you'd like.
Yeah, real quickly, that just give us the bones about that because it is interesting.
Yeah, it's just what it sounds like. So it's a return to the patronage system of the Renaissance, wherein the consumers of art would directly finance the art they wanted to exist. And they bring in a court painter, they bring in a court poet, a court astronomer even, and finance the work that they wanted to have made. So it's that system, but where the Neo comes in is leveraging new technologies like Kickstarter and like Patreon and like Webtoon to directly connect creators with the backers who want to fund their art.
And that whole process I've been worried about for a while. I thought, well, gosh, it sounds great and you see so much progress, but are people going to be burned out by this? Are they going to say, hey, I've been giving for a while, I'm done with this system? But that doesn't appear to be the case. I mean, there's so many creators who are doing it just like you are saying. And also there are bigger platforms like Angel Studios, and they've been very successful. So I think that the culture really has shifted and accepted and even embraced this methodology. So good on them. Your latest book is the Burned book, and I want you to maybe give us a little teaser about that. And at the end, I want to mention that you can go to Indiegogo.com and you can help support that. But this is a prequel to an existing series of yours. Can you tell us more about it?
Certainly. Yes. It's the dark fantasy grit and visceral action of Game of Thrones, minus the stale 90s nihilism, but plus a definite ending. because it's the first book in the Arkwright saga, which gives the background for my award-winning Soul Cycle I mentioned earlier, An Ethereal and Soul Dancer being the first 2 books in that Dragon Award-winning series. So the ending is written. You're not gonna have to worry about being left holding the bag by starting a series if the author doesn't finish. I finished 3 series before this, so I know how to do it, and I already have the ending. But the way I put it is elevator pitch. Imagine if Glenn Cook had ghost written the Silmarillion from Tolkien's notes. And that's a burn book.
Nice. And that is being supported via Indiegogo, just one of the many ways that people can support your work. You know, I just recently spoke to Andrew Clavin, and he said, which is just amazing, that his most recent book, The House of Love and Death, which you'll hear more about on the show very soon, but he said that some of the editor's comments about his work were, I mean, just the usual, you can't say this, you can't write that, this is ineffective, this is, this is offensive. I mean, this is Andrew Clavin. This is one of our best writers who's running into this. Have you run into that at all? Or have you, because you dodged the gatekeepers from an early start, have you not had to deal with that at all?
The latter.
Yeah.
That's the liberating part. I have never had to deal with a blue pencil manuscript coming back saying, well, the sensitivity readers found this a bit problematic. If on other occasions that I've had people complain and say, like, oh, well, your publisher is going to be about this. And be like, hold on, let me get him. Yes, this is Brian's publisher, Brian. We take your complaint seriously, and we're going to give him a stern talking to.
That's right.
Followed by Michael laughter. So that's what's great about Indy.
That is wonderful, by the way. I love hearing that story. And it is, listen, if they can go back and do the sensitivity reader shtick to Agatha Christie and Ian Fleming, they can do it to anybody. So the fact that you're working around that is wonderful. You know, one of the things you wrote in the past as a book, I think it was 2020, called Don't Give Money to People Who Hate You. And obviously it's as pithy as possible, but drill down a little bit on that, because I think, listen, it's only 3 years later, it still applies. But I think there's a sense for people either on the right or even on the center who are frustrated with the system, where they don't know what to do, but you're offering them a solution of sorts. Give us a quick snapshot of that book.
Yes. So my training in college, as you hinted at, wasn't an MFA or even an English degree. I'm a trained Catholic theologian. So I looked at the cultural landscape, and it clicked with me that this problem could be mapped out according to traditional Catholic moral theology. So it's the principle of what factors go into a moral act, right? Like cooperation with evil. And if you think about it, putting down $20 to go see a movie made by Disney, right, who just insult their audience at every turn, and do advocate for objectively evil political policies, that's remote cooperation with evil by giving them your money, even if you don't willingly agree with what they're doing. You're still supporting them at a low level. So you are doing evil in a remote sense. And people often mistake the gist of the book. People haven't read it, and they just see the title and they go, oh, well, Disney's not going to miss your $20. But that's not the point. The point is, it's not about them. It's not about Disney's wallet. It's about your soul. Mm-hmm. And if anything, continuing to support megacorps that want you humiliated and want your kids enslaved is just cowardly, right? It's just degrading to you. But like you said, in the book, I give people answers for how to reclaim their dignity from the pop cult and have fun while they're doing that. One of the ways is by seeking out and patronizing fine conservative creators like us, like Alexander Macris, whose Adventure Conqueror Kings role-playing game cracked 6 figures on Kickstarter in 1 day.
Wow.
2 days ago. Yeah.
And by the way, a couple of quick thoughts. They will miss that $20 because it isn't just one person. It's many people who are withdrawing their money. Also, I speak to a lot of I guess you could call them right of center artists, and the vast majority of them are not about making moral lessons or lecturing people with their art. Often the vast majority of what they do is just entertaining. It's just fun. I mean, Mike Barron comes to mind. He never wants to get on a soapbox. He just wants to tell a rocking story, and he often does. That's what he does best. So I think there's something liberating about this whole process. And again, it is not people who may be on the right or independent looking to lecture from a different platform. It's not that, and I think that's so invigorating. One thing I want to ask before I let you go, Brian, is, you're an artist. Where do you find inspiration? And maybe there's a million answers to this, but I think that each person gets inspired by different sources. It could be spiritual. It could be a walk in the park. It could be a conversation with a loved one. It could be a weird confrontation with a neighbor. I was kind of curious, are there maybe consistent sources that you find or you turn to draw inspiration from for your stories?
Yes, it largely depends on the project. For the Soul Cycle and the Arkwright Cycle, it was largely dark fantasy, sci-fi fantasy stuff, like the darker chapters of the Silmarillion, like the Children of Hurin, all the way up to the Spelljammer setting for Dungeons and Dragons, to now stuff like Glenn Cook and the Black Company. For Combat Frame Exceed, the entire impetus of the project was, hey, I really like spiky Japanese mecha anime. I also like stompy mechs like Battletech, but both of them seem to have devolved into these creative dead ends. I know, I'll fix it by combining them. Mm-hmm. Take what works from both to fix what's not working in the other, like the frog DNA from Jurassic Park. And that was a pretty smashing success.
That's right. Although your work has turned out much better than the event at that particular theme park. That seemed a little bit disastrous, but I know exactly what you mean. But well, Brian, thank you.
Let's not tempt fate.
That's right. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your lessons with our listeners here. And I hope you swing by Indiegogo. You can support his newest vision, The Burned Book. But also you can check him out on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/Brian Niemeier. And the last name is Niemeier. And another source is subscribestar.com, and that is subscribestar.com/Brian Niemeier. Again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You are an inspiration to people. I guarantee there's someone out there who's been itching to write a novel, create something. They just haven't found the right nudge, the right push, but you did it. Other people can. And it's just a quick, again, a brief aside for anyone. Just, you can use your money. We often talk about boycotts. I like boycotts too. Buy stuff, support stuff. When you have an independent artist who's gone rogue, who's not willing to play the system's games, you can just give a little bit of money, just $5, just $2. Support these Patreon accounts, support these Indiegogo campaigns. It means all the difference to them. And that's why we get individual voices coming out like yours, Brian. Thanks so much again.
Thank you, Christian.
That's another bonus episode in the proverbial can. I hope you'll subscribe to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. We've got more bonus episodes on the way, plus our regular installments every Wednesday. We got some great conversations coming up, including chats with Andrew Clavin and Dinesh D'Souza of Police State fame. Stay well, stay free, and keep fighting for free speech. It is the battle of our generation.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.